Captain Jake Morrison stood at the massive window of the Federation headquarters, watching ships from hundreds of different worlds drift through space like distant stars. Some looked like flowing metal ribbons, others resembled giant crystals, and a few seemed to be made of pure light. Among them, the human ships looked like simple metal boxes with engines stuck to the back. 3 years had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Federation. 3 years of being treated like the awkward new kid at school. Jake had served 20 years in Earth's military before becoming a Federation representative, but nothing had prepared him for this level of dismissal. "They're laughing at us again," said Dr. Lisa Grant, walking up beside him. She carried a data pad filled with notes about alien cultures, though most of those cultures barely acknowledged humans existed. Lisa had spent her whole career studying alien life, dreaming of the day humans would join the galactic community. The reality was more disappointing than she had imagined. "Let them laugh," Jake replied, though his jaw was tight. "We earned our place here." "Did we, though?" Lisa asked quietly. "Sometimes I wonder if they only accepted us because we were persistent, not because we belonged." The Federation was enormous. Over 200 species spread across 3 arms of the galaxy, with technology that made human science look like cave paintings. The Federation headquarters alone was larger than Earth's moon, built around an artificial star that provided endless energy. Species that had mastered time travel, matter creation, and dimensional folding all gathered here to make decisions that affected trillions of lives. And then there were humans, short-lived, emotional, and flying around in ships that still used chemical fuel for backup power. Commander Ryan Bell appeared at Jake's shoulder, his expression grim. "Sir, Ambassador Phillips wants to see you. The assembly is starting soon." Jake nodded and followed Ryan through the corridors of the headquarters. The walls were made of some material that shifted colors based on the viewer's species, showing each alien exactly what they needed to see. For humans, it just looked like expensive metal. They passed groups of aliens who barely glanced their way. The Veltar were impossible to miss. 12-foot-tall beings that looked like walking crystal formations, their bodies ringing with musical tones as they moved. They had been alive for thousands of years each, and treated humans like mayflies. The Zephyrians were worse. These energy beings had no physical form at all, appearing as shimmering clouds of light that spoke directly into minds. Jake could feel their amusement as they passed, like mental laughter that wasn't quite cruel but certainly wasn't kind. Ambassador Kate Phillips was waiting in the human delegation's quarters, which were modest compared to the palace-sized spaces given to older Federation members. Kate had been a diplomat for 30 years, serving as Earth's ambassador to various countries before taking on the galaxy. She was tough, smart, and increasingly frustrated with humanity's position in the Federation. "How are we looking for the vote?" Jake asked. Kate's expression said everything. "Not good. The Corvan Empire is openly hostile to our application. The Veltar consider us too young to handle advanced technology. The Zephyrians think we're too emotional to be trusted with hyperspace routes." "And the Ethereal Collective?" Lisa asked. "They haven't said anything, which might be worse. When beings who exist in multiple dimensions don't bother to comment on your existence, it's not a good sign." The application Kate mentioned was humanity's request for full Federation membership. Currently, humans were junior members, allowed to attend meetings and trade with other species, but blocked from accessing the most advanced technologies and restricted hyperspace routes that would allow faster travel between Earth and the galaxy's core worlds. "We have to try," Jake said. "We've proven ourselves. Earth's agricultural techniques are feeding 3 different worlds. Our medical knowledge saved the Altarian colonies from that plague. We've contributed to the Federation." "I know," Kate replied. "But contribution and respect are different things. Come on, let's get this over with." The assembly hall was a massive sphere that could hold representatives from every Federation species. The human delegation sat in a small section near the back, while the major powers occupied elaborate platforms near the center. The Veltar section looked like a crystal garden, ringing with constant musical communication. The Zephyrians had no physical seating, their energy forms floating in designated areas. The Corvan Empire's representatives sat on throne-like chairs that looked more like weapons than furniture. Kate walked to the speaking platform, a simple circle of light that adjusted to each species' needs. For humans, it just provided good acoustics and lighting. "Honored representatives," Kate began, "I come before you today to request that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Federation. We have fulfilled all requirements, contributed to the common good, and proven our commitment to galactic peace." The response was immediate. The Veltar began ringing with what could only be described as laughter, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The Zephyrians' amusement filled the minds of everyone present, a feeling of watching a child play dress-up in adult clothes. Zilthera, the Veltar Prime Minister, rose from her crystal throne. Her voice rang out like a bell. "Honored humans, you are indeed adorable. In my 3,000 years of life, I have seen many young species attempt to rush into galactic civilization. You have existed for what, 200,000 years? My people have been spacefaring for longer than your species has had language." The Zephyrian overlord known as Nexus projected his thoughts directly into every mind present. His mental voice carried condescension like a physical weight. These primitive flesh creatures, bound by chemical emotions and brief lifespans, believe they can handle the responsibilities of full membership. They are barely past their tribal stage of development. General Thax of the Corvan Empire stood next, his reptilian features twisted in what might have been a smile. "The humans have been useful servants. Their agricultural techniques and medical knowledge serve the Federation well. But servants do not sit at the same table as their masters." Jake felt his hands clench into fists. Lisa put a calming hand on his arm, but he could see the anger in her eyes too. Ryan looked like he was calculating how many Corvans he could take in a fight before being stopped. Kate maintained her diplomatic composure, though Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. "We respectfully disagree with your assessment. Humanity has proven its worth through actions, not age. We have solved problems that older species could not, using approaches that your traditional methods missed." More laughter from the Veltar. More condescending amusement from the Zephyrians. The ethereal collective remained silent, which somehow felt like the worst dismissal of all. "Perhaps," Zilthera continued, "in another 1,000 years, when humans have learned to control their emotions and develop proper technology, we can revisit this discussion. Until then, you serve the Federation best in your current capacity." Kate was about to respond when every communication device in the assembly hall began screaming at once. Emergency broadcasts from across the galaxy flooded the hall's systems. The massive display screens that usually showed peaceful Federation worlds now showed panicked reports from deep space monitoring stations. Jake grabbed his personal communicator as reports poured in. Long-range sensors at the galaxy's edge were detecting something impossible. A massive artificial structure approaching from the void between galaxies. Initial scans suggested it was larger than most star systems, clearly artificial, and heading directly toward the Milky Way at impossible speeds. The assembly hall fell silent as the reports continued. This wasn't a ship or even a fleet. This was something beyond anything the Federation had ever encountered. And it was broadcasting a message. The message was simple, delivered in mathematical sequences that every species could understand. Surrender, or face extinction. For the first time since joining the Federation, humans weren't being laughed at. Everyone was too terrified to laugh at anything. The Federation headquarters buzzed with panic for 3 days straight. Every major species had their best scientists working around the clock, trying to understand what was heading toward their galaxy. The approaching object was massive beyond imagination, larger than anything any civilization had ever built. Worse yet, it was moving at speeds that should have been impossible. Dr. Lisa Grant had barely slept since the emergency began. She sat in the human delegation's small research lab, surrounded by data streams from across the galaxy. Her eyes were red from staring at screens, and she had gone through 6 cups of coffee in the past hour alone. But something in the alien transmission had caught her attention, something that none of the other species seemed to notice. "Jake, you need to see this," she called out as Captain Morrison entered the lab. Jake looked as tired as she felt, The past 3 days had been filled with emergency meetings where the human delegation was mostly ignored, while the major powers debated strategy. The same species that had mocked humanity just days ago now acted like humans didn't exist at all. "What did you find?" Jake asked, pulling up a chair beside her. Lisa pointed to the mathematical sequences displayed on her screen. Everyone's been focusing on the main message, the surrender demand. But look at these underlying patterns in the transmission. The screen showed complex mathematical equations that hurt to look at. Jake had been a military officer, not a scientist, but he could tell these numbers were important. "I don't understand most of this," Jake admitted. "That's just it," Lisa said, her voice getting excited. "Neither do the other species, but I do. These aren't just random mathematical sequences. They're using problem-solving approaches that humans developed independently." She pulled up another screen showing human mathematical concepts. "Look at this equation here. It's using what we call fuzzy logic, a way of handling uncertain information that most other species never developed. And this pattern here uses chaos theory, which the Veldtar dismissed as primitive randomness when we tried to share it with them." Jake studied the screens, trying to understand what Lisa was telling him. "Are you saying these aliens know human mathematics?" "I'm saying they're using uniquely human ways of thinking," Lisa replied. "The Veldtar approach everything through pure crystal logic. The Zephyrians use telepathic mind links to solve problems together. The Corvins rely on brute force calculations. But these equations are using human-style intuitive leaps and emotional logic." Commander Ryan Bell appeared in the doorway, looking grim. "We've got more problems. The object is getting closer, and now we're getting detailed scans." Jake and Lisa followed Ryan to the main communication center, where Ambassador Phillips was coordinating with Federation Command. The large display screen showed the approaching threat in terrible detail. It wasn't a single ship. It was a massive armada of interconnected vessels, so large it looked like a metal planet with thousands of smaller ships attached to its surface. The design was unlike anything in Federation databases, sleek, organic-looking, and somehow wrong in a way that made humans feel uncomfortable just looking at it. "How long until it reaches Federation space?" Jake asked. 2 weeks, Kate replied. "Maybe less if it keeps accelerating." The screen switched to show Federation military leaders discussing strategy. General Corvin of the Reptilian Empire was arguing with Overlord Nexus, while Prime Minister Zilthera provided analysis from her crystal throne. "Our combined fleets number over 50,000 ships," General Corvin was saying. "Surely we can stop any threat through superior firepower." Overlord Nexus projected his disagreement into everyone's minds. "Raw power means nothing if we cannot predict their tactics. We must analyze their technology and develop countermeasures." "My people have run every possible simulation," Zilthera added, her crystal voice ringing with concern. "The approaching vessels use technology that should not exist. Their energy signatures make no sense according to known physics." Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. "They're missing something important. All of them." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "They're trying to analyze this threat using their own ways of thinking," Lisa explained. "The Corvins want to fight it head-on. The Zephyrians want to outthink it. The Veldtar want to understand it completely before acting. But what if this enemy already knows how all of them think?" Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying they've faced these species before?" "Maybe not these exact species, but similar ones," Lisa said. "Think about it. If you were going to invade a galaxy, wouldn't you study your enemies first? Learn their tactics, their technology, their ways of thinking?" Ryan nodded slowly. "It's basic military strategy. Know your enemy better than they know themselves." "But," Lisa continued, "what if there was one species they hadn't studied? One approach to warfare they'd never encountered?" Jake understood immediately. "Humans." "Exactly," Lisa said. "We've only been in space for a few hundred years. We've only been part of the Federation for 3 years. If this enemy has been planning this invasion for thousands of years, they would have no data on us." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. Every other species in the Federation followed predictable patterns. The Corvins always chose the most aggressive solution. The Zephyrians always tried to outthink their problems. The Veltar always sought perfect understanding before acting. But humans were different. Humans were unpredictable. They made decisions based on emotions and gut feelings. They took risks that no logical species would consider. They adapted and improvised in ways that drove other species crazy. "We need to tell the Federation leadership," Jake said. "Will they listen?" Ryan asked. 3 days ago they were laughing at us. Kate overheard their conversation and approached. "What are you talking about?" Jake quickly explained Lisa's discovery about the mathematical patterns and their theory about the enemy's knowledge of Federation species. Kate was quiet for a long moment. "You're suggesting that humanity's greatest weakness might be our greatest strength?" "I'm suggesting that our unpredictability might be the one thing this enemy hasn't planned for," Jake replied. Before Kate could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the headquarters. The main display screen switched to show a priority message from Federation scouts at the galaxy's edge. The approaching armada had launched probe ships ahead of the main fleet. These smaller vessels, each still larger than most Federation battleships, were already engaging the outer defense stations. The reports were terrifying. The enemy probes seemed to know exactly what the Federation defenders would do. Every tactical maneuver the Federation used was countered perfectly. Every weapon system the defenders deployed was neutralized almost instantly. It was like watching a chess game where one player knew every move the other would make 5 turns in advance. "Impossible," General Corvin growled over the communication system. "They're countering tactics we've never used before in battle." "Because they studied us," Overlord Nexus projected, his mental voice filled with something humans had never heard from him before: fear. "They know how we think. They know what we will do before we do it." Prime Minister Zilthera's crystal voice carried a note of despair. "In 3,000 years of life, I have never seen anything like this. We are fighting an enemy that knows our every thought." The Federation's outer defenses crumbled within hours. Ships that had never been defeated before were destroyed without landing a single hit on the enemy probes. Jake watched the reports with growing understanding. Lisa was right. This enemy had studied the major Federation species for centuries, maybe millennia. They knew exactly how Corvins would attack, how Zephyrians would think, how Veltar would analyze. But they had no idea how humans would react. The main display screen switched to show the Federation Emergency Council in session. For the first time since the crisis began, the major species weren't arguing about strategy. They were simply staring at the tactical displays in stunned silence. Finally, Overlord Nexus spoke, his mental voice reaching every mind in the headquarters. "We need a new approach, something unpredictable, something this enemy has never encountered." There was a long pause. Then, surprisingly, Prime Minister Zilthera spoke up. "Perhaps we should ask the humans for their opinion." General Corvin's reptilian features twisted in anger. "The humans? They barely understand basic military strategy." "Exactly," Zilthera replied. "They think in ways we do not. Ways this enemy may not have studied." Jake felt the weight of the moment. 3 days ago, these same beings had dismissed humanity as primitive children playing at civilization. Now they were asking for help because humanity was too primitive to be predictable. Ambassador Phillips stepped forward. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the ethereal collective finally spoke, their voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We are asking you to save us all. Because you are the only species in the galaxy that this enemy does not understand. You are our only hope precisely because you are everything we said you were not: illogical, emotional, and unpredictable." The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Humanity's greatest insult had just become their greatest compliment. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the Federation's main war room, surrounded by alien leaders who had ignored him just a week ago. Now they hung on his every word like their lives depended on it, which they probably did. You want me to command the entire Federation fleet? Jake asked, still not quite believing what he was hearing. Prime Minister Zilthera's crystal form rang with nervous energy. Captain Morrison, our traditional methods have failed completely. The enemy destroys our forces before we can even engage them properly. We need someone who thinks differently. General Corvin looked like swallowing broken glass would be more pleasant than what he was about to say. The Corvin Empire formally requests that you take supreme command of our military forces. Even Overlord Nexus, the proud Zephyrian leader, projected his agreement into Jake's mind. Your species' unpredictable nature is our only advantage. We must use it. Jake looked around the room at species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, now asking a human to save them. It felt surreal. Commander Ryan Bell stood behind him, trying not to look as shocked as Jake felt. I'll need complete authority, Jake said finally. No questioning my orders, no matter how strange they seem to you. Done, Zilthera replied immediately. And I want humans in key positions throughout the fleet. My people need to be where they can make quick decisions without asking permission. General Corvin's reptilian features twisted, but he nodded. Agreed. Jake turned to Dr. Lisa Grant, who had been working with alien scientists for days. Lisa, what do we know about how these enemies fight? Lisa pulled up data on the main display. They're incredibly efficient. Every move is calculated. They never waste energy or take unnecessary risks. It's like fighting a perfect computer that knows all the answers. Perfect computers have weaknesses, Jake said. They can't handle things that don't make sense. Over the next 3 days, Jake implemented changes that made the alien military leaders deeply uncomfortable. He split the combined Federation fleet into smaller groups instead of keeping them together. He assigned human officers to command positions on alien ships. Most importantly, he ordered every fleet to carry supplies for field repairs using basic human tools and techniques. Commander Bell worked with alien engineers to modify their ships in ways that violated every principle of efficient design. Federation vessels, known for their perfect engineering, now carried welding equipment, spare metal plates, and toolkits that looked primitive compared to their normal technology. Sir, the Veltar are asking why we're putting manual override switches on their crystal-based control systems, Ryan reported. Because when their fancy systems fail, someone needs to be able to fix them with a hammer and some wire, Jake replied. Dr. Grant had been working with alien scientists to understand something even more important than technology, how human emotions could actually help alien abilities work better. Jake, you need to see this, Lisa called from her lab. Jake found her working with a Veltar scientist named Hilnara, whose crystal body was glowing brighter than usual. Show him what we discovered, Lisa said excitedly. Hilnara's musical voice filled the room. Dr. Grant asked me to try channeling my crystal energy while she focused on human emotional states. The results are remarkable. Lisa held up her hand, concentrating on feelings of determination and courage. As she did, Hilnara's crystal body began resonating with power that made the air itself hum with energy. Human emotions create energy patterns that amplify Veltar abilities, Lisa explained. When I focus on strong feelings, their crystals respond by becoming more powerful. We tried this with Zephyrians too, Hilnara added. Their telepathic abilities become more focused when channeled through human determination. Even the Corvins showed improvement, Lisa continued. Their weapons become more accurate when fired by someone feeling what humans call righteous anger. Jake realized what this meant. Humans weren't just unpredictable. They could make their alien allies more powerful by being emotional in ways other species had learned to suppress. We need to get this information to every mixed crew in the fleet, Jake ordered. The first real test came when enemy scout ships reached the outer systems of Federation space. Jake's strategy was simple and completely insane by military standards. Instead of trying to outfight the scouts, human-led fleets would try to confuse them. Captain Susan Lee commanded a mixed fleet of 30 ships, including humans, Veltar, and Corvins. When the enemy scouts approached her position, she did something no logical commander would ever do. She ordered her ships to split up and attack from completely random directions. The enemy scouts, programmed to counter logical military tactics, didn't know how to respond to ships that seemed to be attacking without any plan at all. While they tried to calculate the strategy behind Susan's chaos, Veltar crystal ships powered by human emotions tore through their formations. Enemy scouts destroyed with minimal losses, Susan reported. They seemed confused by our approach. More reports came in from across the battle line. Human commanders were winning engagements by doing things that made no tactical sense, retreating when they should attack, attacking when they should retreat, and using weapons in ways they were never designed for. Lieutenant Danny Torres took his small squadron and rammed it directly into a much larger enemy formation, something that should have resulted in instant destruction. Instead, the enemy ship scattered in confusion, unable to understand why anyone would attempt such a suicidal maneuver. Danny's ship survived and destroyed 3 enemy vessels. The enemy's main fleet was still approaching, but their advanced scouts were sending back data that didn't make sense. How do you fight an enemy that doesn't follow any logical patterns? Jake received reports from across the galaxy as small, human-led fleets engaged enemy forces. The results were consistently the same. Humans won by being unpredictable, and alien allies fought better when working alongside emotional humans. But the real test was still coming. The main enemy fleet was enormous, carrying weapons that could destroy entire planets. Jake knew that small victories against scouts wouldn't matter if they couldn't stop the main force. "Sir, we're getting communication from the enemy fleet," Ryan reported. The main display showed a message transmitted directly from the approaching armada. For the first time, the enemy was trying to communicate beyond their simple surrender demand. The message was in mathematical patterns. But Lisa translated it quickly. "They're asking who we are. They want to know what species is commanding the Federation fleets." Jake smiled. "They're confused. They can't figure out what we are or how we think." "Should we respond?" Kate asked. "Yes," Jake said, "but not the way they expect." Instead of sending mathematical formulas or logical explanations, Jake had the communication team send something no alien species would ever transmit: a collection of human music, poetry, and art. They sent rock songs and classical symphonies, love poems and war stories, paintings of sunsets and photographs of children playing. The enemy fleet's response was immediate. They stopped advancing. For the first time since entering the galaxy, the unstoppable force had encountered something that made them pause. "They're trying to analyze what we sent them," Lisa reported, watching the communication channels. "Their computers are working overtime trying to understand human culture." "How long until they figure it out?" Jake asked. "Maybe never," Lisa replied. "How do you logically analyze something that was never meant to be logical?" General Corvin approached Jake with something that might have been respect in his reptilian eyes. "Captain Morrison, your tactics are working, but the enemy's main fleet still outnumbers us 50-1. Jake nodded. "I know. That's why we're going to do something really crazy." He called up a star map showing the hyperspace routes near the galaxy's edge. There was a massive hyperspace nexus there, a junction point that connected to routes leading to other galaxies. It was heavily fortified and considered one of the most important strategic locations in Federation space. "We're going to make our stand there," Jake announced. "Sir, fighting near the hyperspace nexus is incredibly dangerous," Ryan warned. "If the nexus gets damaged, it could create a cascade that affects hyperspace travel across the entire region." "I know," Jake replied. "That's exactly what I'm counting on." The alien leaders looked at Jake with expressions that ranged from horror to admiration. He was planning something that could save the galaxy or destroy it. No logical species would ever consider such a risk, but then again, humans had never been accused of being logical. The combined Federation fleet gathered near the hyperspace nexus at the edge of the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching as thousands of ships from dozens of species prepared for what would either be their greatest victory or their final battle. The enemy armada approached like a dark cloud blotting out the stars. Their ships numbered in the hundreds of thousands, each one larger and more advanced than anything the Federation had ever built. But Jake wasn't looking at the enemy ships. He was watching the hyperspace nexus itself, a swirling vortex of energy. that connected their galaxy to the vast emptiness beyond. "Sir, enemy fleet will be in weapons range in 2 hours," Commander Ryan Bell reported. "Dr. Grant, are the calculations ready?" Jake asked. Lisa looked up from her console, her face pale but determined. "The hyperspace cascade will work, but Jake, if we trigger it, there's no going back. The Nexus will collapse and anyone caught in the cascade will be forced through the exit portal." "Where does the exit lead?" asked Ambassador Kate Phillips. "Unknown space," Lisa replied. "We have no idea what's on the other side. It could be empty void, or it could be inhabited by something worse than what we're fighting now." General Corvin approached, his reptilian features grim. "Captain Morrison, my engineers report that triggering such a cascade is suicide. No species has ever deliberately damaged a hyperspace nexus." "That's because no species has ever been desperate enough," Jake replied. "Or crazy enough?" Prime Minister Zilthera's crystal voice rang with concern. "If we destroy the nexus, we will be trapped on the other side with no way home." "Better than being dead," Jake said simply. Overlord Nexus projected his thoughts to everyone on the bridge. "The enemy fleet is trying to communicate with us again. They are demanding to know our species and our intentions." Jake smiled grimly. "Tell them we're humans, and our intention is to do something they've never seen before." The battle began exactly as Jake planned, with complete chaos. Instead of forming logical battle lines, the Federation fleet scattered in every direction. Human commanders led, their mixed crews in attacks that made no sense, using emotions and instincts instead of careful strategy. Commander Bell led a squadron of human and Veltar ships directly into the heart of the enemy formation. As his crew focused on courage and determination, the Veltar crystals began glowing with power that made their weapons twice as effective. Enemy ships that should have destroyed them easily found themselves outgunned by emotional energy they couldn't understand. Captain Susan Lee took her fleet and began ramming damaged enemy ships with vessels that were already crippled. To the eye, enemies' logical minds, this looked like waste of resources. They couldn't understand that humans were willing to sacrifice everything to protect something they believed in. Lieutenant Danny Torres led a desperate assault on the enemy command ship, knowing full well it was a suicide mission, but his willingness to die for his friends gave the Zephyrian telepaths in his squadron a focus they had never experienced before. Their combined mental assault actually managed to damage the enemy's communication systems. Dr. Grant worked frantically at her console, preparing the hyperspace cascade while monitoring the battle. "Jake, we're losing too many ships. Even with our unpredictable tactics, they're just too strong." "I know," Jake replied. "It's time for the final phase." He opened communication channels to every ship in the Federation fleet. "All human crew members, this is Captain Morrison. What I'm about to ask goes against every rule of warfare and common sense. I need volunteers to manually trigger the hyperspace cascade. This is a one-way mission." The response was immediate. Every human ship volunteered instantly. "Sir, we're with you," Susan Lee reported from her damaged vessel. "Ready to go, Captain," Danny Torres added. Though his ship was barely holding together, all human vessels proceed to hyperspace nexus. Everyone else maintain the battle line. Jake turned to the alien leaders on his bridge. "You should know that once we trigger the cascade, you'll have about 10 minutes to get through the exit portal before the nexus collapses completely." General Corvin stared at him. "You're asking us to abandon our galaxy?" "I'm asking you to survive," Jake replied. "And maybe on the other side, we can build something better." The human ships broke off from the main battle and headed straight for the hyperspace nexus. The enemy fleet, confused by this apparently suicidal maneuver, tried to stop them, but human pilots were willing to sacrifice their ships to protect their friends, something the enemy's logical programming couldn't counter. Lisa worked desperately to coordinate the cascade timing. "Jake, the human ships need to hit specific points around the nexus simultaneously. If the timing is off by even a few seconds, the cascade won't work. Our people won't let us down," Jake said with complete confidence. He was right. Despite enemy fire, despite damaged ships and wounded crews, Every human vessel reached its assigned position exactly on time. Triggering cascade in 3, 2, 1, Lisa announced. The hyperspace nexus exploded with energy. Space itself began to twist and fold as the cascade spread outward. The enemy fleet, caught completely off guard by humans deliberately destroying a strategic resource, found themselves being pulled toward the collapsing nexus. But something unexpected happened. As the cascade spread, the other Federation species made a choice that surprised everyone, including themselves. "Federation fleet, this is Prime Minister Zilthara," came the crystal voice over all communication channels. "All ships, follow the humans through the exit portal. We will not abandon our allies. Corvin Empire ships, follow the human fleet," General Corvin ordered, his voice filled with something that might have been pride. Today we learned what courage really means. Even Overlord Nexus projected his decision to the entire fleet. "Zephyrian vessels, we go where the humans go. They have shown us that logic without heart is meaningless." One by one, every surviving Federation ship turned away from their home galaxy and headed for the exit portal. They were choosing to follow humans into the unknown rather than face the enemy alone. The enemy fleet tried to follow, but the cascade was too powerful. Most of their ships were caught in the collapsing hyperspace and scattered across unknown regions of space. The few that made it through the exit found themselves outnumbered by Federation forces that were no longer afraid. Jake watched from the bridge as his ship passed through the exit portal. For a moment there was only darkness. Then they emerged into a region of space unlike anything they had ever seen. Stars sparkled like diamonds against a backdrop of colorful nebulae. Planets orbited in perfect formation around young suns. It was beautiful, untouched and completely empty of any hostile forces. "Sir, we're getting readings from across the region," Ryan reported, his voice filled with amazement. "There are hundreds of habitable worlds here. The resources are incredible." Dr. Grant looked up from her sensors, smiling for the first time in weeks. "Jake, this region is paradise. It's like the galaxy set aside its best worlds and was waiting for someone to find them." Ambassador Phillips opened communication channels to the fleet. "All Federation vessels, welcome to our new home. Today we learned that sometimes the exit that looks like defeat is actually the entrance to something better." Years passed. The combined Federation species built colonies throughout their new region of space. Human emotional intelligence became the foundation of their new civilization, while alien technology provided the tools to build it. The Veltar learned to value feelings as much as logic. The Zephyrians discovered that individual determination was as important as group thinking. The Corvins found that protecting others was more honorable than conquering them. Jake Morrison became the first supreme commander of what they called the Unity Fleet, leading exploration missions into their new home. Kate Phillips established the first multi-species colony built on cooperation instead of hierarchy. Dr. Grant, now an old woman, taught young humans and aliens together about the day when humanity's greatest weakness became the galaxy's greatest strength. She often ended her lessons with the same words. They mocked us for being emotional, unpredictable, and willing to sacrifice everything for others. They called us primitive and illogical. But when the time came to choose between survival and doing what was right, only humans were crazy enough to destroy their own way home to save their friends. And that's when we learned that the exit everyone feared was actually the entrance to everything we had been looking for. The enemy that had once seemed unstoppable was scattered across the void, their perfect logic useless against species that had learned to value heart over mind. And in the distant galaxy, they had abandoned. Intercepted communications told of worlds in rebellion, species breaking free from conquered empires, all inspired by stories of the humans who had taught the galaxy that sometimes the most illogical choice is the only right one.